Hey, how's it going? Today we are going to be starting to make a pipe. So if you watched my last video, I showed you how to make these using Cone Wizard. You can print these out and lay them out on a sheet of steel and like glue stick them on and then cut them out to cut out your pieces that you need. Or it can provide you with a DXF that you could send to a laser or a water jet and get these cut out. I got mine lasered out, but again, like it's you can easily take one of these cones. So these are all taped together. But you could easily just lay this thing out flat on a piece of steel, cut it out there, and then take your grinder, go and trace it all out, or if you have a plasma or a jigsaw or something, and yeah, you can get the same shapes like this, just with probably a little bit more effort than what it took me to get them. So I think I'm going to try and cover a few different ways to form these. These guys, for example, that you saw in the preview there, I've been hand forming over mandrels. Now, the reason why I was doing those is a lot of those have a small entry exit. They won't fit on the slip roll that I have sitting here. So you'll probably may have to hand form a few, and there is a few tricks to it to set yourself up for success. Yeah, you're gonna need a few different mandrels. So we have this little guy here, which is useful for when I'm doing the very small ones. And I have this medium-sized one, which is also good for these, and also for doing like the seams on this. And then I have this larger guy, which is just a piece of scrap that I found that has tapers on both ends. That also makes it easier as well. Any ones that you can fit on the slip roll, you can also do on there. Granted, not everyone has a small little slip roll, and not all the pieces will fit if you have a small exhaust diameter, so there are some you're going to have to do hand formed, and then some you can do on the slip roll. I'm going to show you both. I don't know if we're going to get into welding them tonight. I might try, but obviously you're going to need some sort of welder, like a TIG, or you could do it with a MIG or a gas welder or anything of the sort, but you will need some type of welder. So I think, yeah, without too much more talking, we'll get into hand rolling some pieces. So what you want to do is mount one of your mandrels in the vise or on a table or a bench or whatever you have that's going to make it solid enough that you can like bang on it and not worry about it too much. Then I'm going to take a piece like so and just start. I like to start in the middle and just work my way out. The other thing you have to kind of take into consideration is when you're bending, you're not just bending in segments of like a line, because you'll end up with a weird twist. You kind of have to think of it like you're bending with this inner curve as if it was one thing. So you're kind of going down the piece like with like a radian or something, however you want to think about it. So just start in the middle. Start just lightly working it ever so slowly. Nice gentle curve. And then when you get to the end, take plastic hammer and just start folding it. And then once you start going with the plastic hammer, you can just feed it up, and just continually tap. And you'll start putting like a nice curve in it, like so. And the same from the other side. have a nice crescent shape, and you can work it a little bit by hand here. Big thing is you don't want to try and kink it, so I like to like bend it in like segments when I do it this way. So just grab a section, give it a little kink, a little bend, not a little kink. Just go slowly. And while you ideally getting it to be round is the end goal, for this first bit of it, just getting the two ends to meet up correctly and sit together flush and not sitting like this or any of that stuff for when you weld it is really my goal at first. After you get it welded or tacked, or a couple of tacks on it anyway, then you can treat the whole thing as like a shape you're trying to get round. So you can put it on your mandrel and then roll it around and take a look at it and see if it's round. And if you have a big enough mandrel, you can wedge it on there, and then when it's on there, you'll see like a gap of light in between it and the mandrel. You know that's a spot that's high up, so you can drive that area down. So you can also just go at it with your hand, just kind of work it over the mandrel, just giving it a slight bend and then rolling it and bending it and rolling it. You can see it's getting tighter. I apologize to any sheet metal people that may or may not be watching this video. I'm not a sheet metal pro. I guess would be the easiest definition would just be a hack, but this is just how I do it with my minimal tools. And the ends are usually pretty tough to do, so you need to bust out the hammer, give it a little bit more of a tap. Doesn't hurt to stop and kind of look at it too and see like, oh, you know, I've over curved it here and I haven't curved it enough here. Just see where you're at. Makes your life a little bit easier. But again, the goal that I'm shooting for is just to get it so that these two edges are flat, and you can push it together and hold it so that you can tack the seam. Then once the seam is welded, you can beat it around a bit more and try and get the thing perfectly round on a mandrel. So that one's pretty good. Obviously there's a little bit of spring to it. I usually put them in the vise just to hold them while I'm tacking them. So just lightly, you don't have to clamp on it very tight, but it just holds the edge nice. So that's how I usually form them on a mandrel by hand. Now let's do one on the slip roll. So for the roller, this is the belly plate. This is a good one to show. But you don't need this. Again, you could follow the same process I did with the other one and very easily make yourself a circular part with the same process. But you can see there, one rolled cone. Ready to weld. Here's a kind of common scenario that you can run into. You overwork a section and it kind of spreads out a little bit. All you gotta do, don't need a grinder or anything that makes a mess. Just grab a file, a couple passes. And you're good to go. One other thing I kind of always find with the slip roll is you'll always end up with like one kind of flat spot where the part jumps out of the roll. You can fix that on the mandrel after, but as long as your ends butt together nicely for welding, then you're good. So for welding and positioning, I just put it in the vise, make sure the edge is nice, and then I can tack it. Make sure your edges are butted well, everything's good, but then you can just tack. And now through the magic of video, I have all my sections welded. Well, they're just tacked. That one's got a big goober I gotta grind down. So these all have to be, I usually re-weld these completely again. That one maybe not so much, I'll just re-weld the sections that I did. I have unfortunately ran out of gas, but I do have a few clips of me doing some welding. The main thing to kind of keep in mind is as you're putting this together, I would highly recommend just tacking each one of these on until you get it together enough that you can test fit it on the bike. One other thing is I made as you can see here, I made like a slip collar. You'll also need to make some sort of mount to hang it on the bike at some point. Maybe I will make another video covering making mounts and hanging it on the bike and what like kind of thoughts of what you should and shouldn't do there. But one thing you do have to take into consideration is the pipe is going to expand and contract, and because it is a large diameter, it may expand and contract quite a bit. So it's usually advisable to make a spring collar, like a sliding collar like this with springs on it, to allow the pipe to move, and then also putting a rubber isolator on the exhaust for the hanger. If you solid mount it, there's a really good chance it's going to break, and I have tried that before and it has broke. So just something to kind of think of as well. So also when you're fitting these, once you've got them all tacked up, you know, you can drive them, you can stake them onto your mandrel like so. And as I was saying, you'll see a gap. And where the gap is means that usually it's too tight of a radius, so you can hit that down with the hammer and continually work it until you get it nice and round. Once you get it round, you want to do the same with this. I would recommend just tacking it in place. So just put it on here, find a section that matches up the nicest, tack it there, and then putting it back onto the mandrel, like sliding it in here, hammering on here, getting this flush, tack it, going around, tacking and making it flush, so you don't end up with a step. So on the inside of this guy here, you can see it's pretty smooth. I have one tiny inclusion right there, and that was the other thing I mentioned as well, is putting it on the mandrel and then resting it on the mandrel and welding it across here. It just keeps the air from getting at the backside, and that's usually when you'll get your inclusions. It's not as good as a purge gas setup, but if you don't have a purge gas setup like me, that's a good way to keep from getting inclusions on the inside of the pipe. Just try and, you know, get it as big as possible. The other thing, it acts as a heat sink, so it keeps you from blowing away accidentally. I have pulse on my TIG, so it's easy to kind of set up to very gently go, and then as you get to the edges, feather out so that you don't blow through. But if you're using something else that doesn't have pulse, yeah, put a heat sink underneath it, and it'll help with A, blowing out around the edges, and B, it'll also help with keeping inclusions from forming on the inside. So I did final weld the part of the tail section together, just because there's no orientation on this, just for kind of a show as well. I had to put the mandrel on the inside here and blend this in a bit. You can see it a little bit here on the outside. You can see a couple little things there where I got too aggressive, but I can tap those out on another mandrel at a later time. And just so we're both we're very aware of this, I am not a welder. Some pretty goobery looking. I mean, it's solid, there's no holes, and it's good, but yeah, I shake a lot, so it's probably never meant to be a welder. So yeah, I wouldn't final weld like this until you are certain that you're happy with the location of everything. Like I said, this doesn't really have an orientation welded to this, because this is just a straight piece. So I'm going to tack this to the other stuff and tack the tail piece on and figure out my exhaust and all that stuff. But just be advised that you don't want to weld yourself into a corner. I highly recommend tacking the whole exhaust together, hanging it on the bike, and going from there. So yeah, I'm going to pick up a bottle tomorrow, and hopefully I can I'm going to pick up a bottle tomorrow, and hopefully I can finish this up. I have a couple, maybe, well, I have quite a few welds to go, but and a bunch of fitting, but hopefully very shortly I'll be able to put this on and do another sound check, and you can hear the pipe and everything. Like I said, maybe I can also do a video just like things to take into consideration when hanging the pipe as well. But I think that's it for tonight. Until next time, take care.